Fullmetal Alchemist has one of the most unique plots I've seen in the battle genre, and is due to the way it handles its story arcs, subplots, and more. In this video, I will analyze what makes the story's plot stand out. I'll start with the story arcs. Battle manga have a specific way of executing arcs. Sometimes the arc will be defined by the location it takes place in, like One Piece, Fairy Tail, and Manga. Other times, it will be defined by the enemies that are being fought, like DBZ, Naruto, and Bleach. Some would have you believe that FMA has no arcs because the writer didn't name any of the arcs, and the arcs can be easy to miss. But it definitely has arcs. These are what I've named them: Lior, Coal Mine Town, Battle on the Train, Show Tucker, Scar, Resin Bull, Fifth Laboratory, Rush Valley, Doubleth, Greed, Lust, Gluttony, North, Countdown, and Final. These are the arcs based on the manga. The anime removes and combines some. Some of the arcs are self-explanatory. I'll summarize the ones that aren't. In the anime, the flashback arc is the first arc, but in the manga, this happens during the Doubleth arc. The Resin Bull arc is where Marco fights Lust in Resin Bull. The Lust arc is where Mustang draws out the homunculus and kills Lust. The Gluttony arc is where Gluttony is captured and ends with Father's reveal and the conspiracy. The North arc is all the stuff in the North, and ends when Ed finally returns after being missing. The Countdown arc is the preparation for the Promised Day. It ends when Mustang starts attacking. The final arc is the Final War. FMA initially follows the arc convention of battle manga. The arcs are separated by the specific location or the enemy they're fighting, but this starts to shift as the story continues. For example, the Lust and Gluttony arcs don't take place in new locations, and they aren't against new enemies. FMA arcs begin to span multiple locations, and the villains are the same ones they've been fighting from before. Every now and then, a new villain is introduced, but rarely are they ever defeated in the same arc, like in traditional battle manga. The first three arcs and the Greed arc are the only ones that introduce and end a villain in the same arc. This makes the story feel more planned out because of how it uses its pieces wisely. It only occasionally introduces new characters, and once those characters have been introduced, they're usually used up until the end of the story, or the end of their lives. What FMA does very differently is that it doesn't just have arcs, it also has multiple subplots from different points of view. This is similar to Game of Thrones, or other stories with several POVs. Initially, there are only two POVs, the Elrics and the villains, but eventually, Scar and Mustang get their own POVs. Each POV is its own, with its own side characters. Sometimes side characters also bounce between different POVs. The reason this is a distinction to make is because not all POVs have a stopping point at the end of an arc. A great example is Scar's POV. For the story arcs, there is a clear split at the end of the Gluttony arc and the start of the North arc, but in Scar's POV, there is no split or conclusion. He escapes Father, finds Marco, and continues his journey throughout both arcs. Speaking of the North arc, it is probably the best example of how the story handles subplots. In that one arc, the main subplots are Edward, Mustang, Scar, and Kimberly. Scar's is about finding his brother's research and evading Kimberly. Ed's is about going to Fort Briggs and searching for May. Mustang's is about setting up plans and having secret conversations. Kimberly's is about finding Scar and making a crest of blood in the North. Towards the end, Al gets his own POV subplot separate from Ed, and it eventually merges with Scar's. The addition of POV subplots allows the plot to be more complex with who is where, especially when characters are making alliances and moving between different POVs. The plot is tightly written. Initially, the main quest is finding a Philosopher's Stone. Each arc naturally flows into the next based on what information the Elrics have learned, or what damage they've taken. That's great causality between arcs. It makes sense why characters are going here and there based on what just happened. Around the Lust arc, the goal of exposing and defeating homunculi becomes another main quest. Arcs like Lust and Gluttony revolve entirely around that. This level of focus is uncommon for battle manga. The story also has a lot of setup and payoff. A great example is the ruins in Xerxes. They were introduced in the Lust arc, but they were incomplete. Then, in the Gluttony arc, Ed finds the rest of the ruins, which allows him to create a transmutation circle to get the group back to reality. Another example is the human transmutation circle in the Fifth Lab. It's shown in the Fifth Lab that the manufactured insurrection in Lior is established. Then it's explained that Lior naturally found peace, but then the military made things worse in the North arc. Finally, at Fort Briggs, Ed realizes that the location of the bloodshed events like Ishval and Lior create the same transmutation circle from the Fifth Lab. This is also revealed to be what Hughes learned when he was killed. This leaner story with less side characters results in a story that has a low amount of plot holes and inconsistencies, though there are some. One notable plot hole is Envy's weight. In the Gluttony arc, Envy is suddenly heavy during his fight against Ling, but in previous arcs, he had the weight of a normal human. He never made huge footprints or crashed through buildings due to his massive weight. There are a couple moments of disbelief as well. For example, Olivia Armstrong is supposed to be a better fighter than Louis Armstrong, but when you watch her actually fight, it doesn't add up. Louis has a physical advantage, and he's an amazing alchemist. How would a regular human with a sword even think of winning? If she had Bradley reflexes and prowess, I could understand, but she doesn't, and Bradley only has that because he's a homunculus. This is played for laughs, but it makes it harder to take the story seriously sometimes, which connects to the pathos issue I've mentioned before in another video. And then when we see the siblings fight Sloth, Lewis is more useful. Mei Chang would be another similar example, though less egregious. She's tiny, yet she can take on enemies twice her size with martial arts. Even more examples would be some of the damage people take. In the Gluttony arc, Gluttony double fist slammed Ling into a different building, and he's still standing and able to move around fine. Isn't he supposed to be human? The reason things like these matter, as opposed to other battle manga, is because characters in FMA are supposed to have human level capabilities, maybe slightly higher. Sometimes the story keeps this logic, like when Ed starts tiring against Slicer due to his blood loss, or when Scar was slowed down by getting shot in the leg and needed healing. So when this starts to be broken with no reasonable explanation, it raises my eyebrow. FMA doesn't rely on battles, which is uncommon for battle manga. I used to view this as a good thing, but ever since my JJK is Just Fights video, I've been leaning towards the other side. Before I was going to argue that FMA is better because it could write an interesting plot without needing action, but I'm done with that. No longer will I criticize a story for having a large amount of fights, or compliment a story for having a low amount of fights. What matters is how much character development, theme development, plot development, and setting development is in the story. Setting is the least important to me. When I use these consistent standards, a lot of the battle-heavy stories and arcs I used to criticize move above FMA. For plot, FMA only becomes good with reveals and reversals around the Lust arc, but even then, battle-heavy arcs like Enies Lobby, Sasuke Recovery, Soul Society, and Shibuya Incident have solid reveals and reversals too. For character development, FMA is extremely behind the average battle manga. Character arcs and backstories are minimal. For themes, I will have a dedicated video on that, but I will say it takes a while for Arakawa to figure it out. For setting, once again, is lagging behind its contemporaries. Let's keep it 100. How much do we know about Jing, Drachma, Kreta, or Erugo? Have we ever seen the inside of some of those nations? If One Piece is praised for the amount of setting development it has, shouldn't FMA be criticized for its lack of quality in that category? Whether you value lore or locations more, FMA has less of it than the others. Most of the story is focused on Amestris. If I can say FMA did things better than its contemporaries, I can also say it did things worse, right? Even when it comes to the shorter story arcs, FMA is lagging. I recently had a video explaining the ideal way a battle manga can write a short arc. Lior to Resemble are all short arcs, each being only an episode when adapted in FMAB. None of these arcs have execution on the level of the ones I mentioned in the video. Returning to battles, FMA doesn't do them too well. Fights in the battle genre are like a writing power move. FMA is in the battle genre. I expect good fights, just like I expect good jokes from a comedy and a good mystery from a mystery. Arakawa choosing to have a low amount of fights and a lower quality of fights is only a negative in my eyes now. I think better fights would have been a net positive. Like I said in my video on alchemy, the magic system has so much untapped potential, and I believe it's because the author did not view fights as a priority, which also resulted in lower quality and quantity. FMA feels like a mix of a battle genre and a schemer genre, except it doesn't do either genre exceptionally well. The fights and the magic system represent the battle genre. The intricate planning, alliances, and moving chess pieces represent the schemer genre. The battles aren't as good as One Piece, Naruto, and Bleach, and the scheming isn't as good as Death Note, Code Geass, or Promised Neverland. In conclusion, FMA's plot is unique compared to orthodox battle manga because of the way the story arcs are free-flowing, the POV subplots that are independent of the story arcs, the strong focus on the main goal, its low fight count, and its combining of the battle and schemer genres.